Good morning, beloved child of God. This is Pastor Jonathan with Robertsdale United Methodist Church. This is our Lenten Devotional for Monday, February 22nd, as we continue through the Gospel of Mark. If this is the first video you're tuning into, one of the things that we're doing this Lent is we're reading through daily and preaching through on Sundays the Gospel of Mark so that we can take a journey with Jesus. Now, obviously, the Sundays between Ash Wednesday and Easter, we won't be able to preach every verse of every chapter, but we are reading every verse together on a daily basis. So there's a 40-day reading plan through Mark's Gospel that I've shared in the description of this video if you want to click on it. If you missed last Thursday, Friday, and Saturday's readings, you can see what they were, and you can watch those videos here on our Facebook page or our website or our YouTube channel. But today's reading comes from Mark chapter 2, verses 13 through 28. There's kind of three stories that are going on in today's reading. We are going to read all three. But this is really a 39-day journey through the Gospel of Mark. It's Monday through Saturdays. We take Sundays off to worship. And the last reading will technically be on Holy Saturday before Easter Sunday, which will be day 39. But day 1 was last Thursday. Today is day 4. So Mark chapter 2, verses 13 through 28. And if you haven't read these verses and you want to just go ahead and pause this video and read them now, again, that's Mark 2, 13 through 28. I'm just going to talk a little bit about them. You can read them on your own. But he begins in verse 13 through verse 17 with the calling of Levi. You might know Levi as Matthew, the writer of Matthew's Gospel. But Levi was a tax collector. He was the son of Alphaeus. He was sitting at his tax booth. And something that if we do our homework, which I did a little bit of homework on this, and Levi, I always kind of thought worked for the Roman government, right? He was a Jew, but he was a tax collector, so he collected taxes on behalf of Rome, which of course made him not likable to his fellow Jews because he worked for the oppressing government. But he actually didn't work directly for Rome. He would have actually worked for the king of the region of Judea that was appointed king over the Jews, who was kind of a puppet, for lack of a better word, of Rome. And we know that king as King Herod, right? If you read the Gospels and the Christmas story especially, you come up with this name, King Herod. But there were two Herods. Herod the Great actually died in 4 BC. And when Herod the Great died, he divided up his kingdom among his 3 sons, Herod Antipas, Archelaus, and Philip. And they were known as tetrarchs because they each got a third of the kingdom. And this place where Levi was, as Jesus and his disciples are traveling to and through Capernaum, this was a place that would not have had a toll booth or a tax booth set up during the time of Herod the Great. So if you can imagine, you're living in a certain area. Some of us have lived through this. You're living through a certain area, and the county or the city changes, and they install a toll. And what a drag it is, this place that you've traveled through, right on the border to get to Capernaum or leave Capernaum. You've never had to pay to go this route before, and all of a sudden there's a booth set up, and to pass that way, a way that you've passed many times before, now all of a sudden you have to pay money. So Levi worked for the king. And because this was such an undesirable job, if we really think about it and look at the history, we can probably surmise that he didn't choose this job. There weren't many Jews that grew up saying, I want to be a tax collector. I want to take money from my own people to eventually go in the pockets of the oppressing government. So he probably had this job because he couldn't get any other job, or this was the best he could do. But he knew what it was to be hated and shunned in service to a king. Then enter Jesus. And this is why this story is so significant in the Gospel of Mark. And as Jesus is calling his disciples, we zoom in on this one particular disciple, Levi. And as Jesus walked along, Jesus is a rabbi. And in that day, disciples went and interviewed rabbis. They went looking for a teacher. Rabbis didn't go out looking for their own students, but Jesus did. And he walked straight up to Levi in his tax booth and he said, "Come, follow me." And part of what Mark wants us to see, I'm not going to say everything there is to say about this passage. I'm just trying to share little nuggets of observation as we seek together to say, what is God saying? What am I seeing? How does this impact my life? It reminds me that in the very beginning of Mark's Gospel, verse 1, this is the beginning of the good news of Jesus the Messiah, the Christ, God's appointed King, the Son of God. The human figure of God's kingdom upon the earth. This is who Mark shows Jesus to be. So in calling Levi, what Jesus is doing is he's saying, hey, you already worked for one king and it's really lousy. Come serve another king. I want your allegiance to be to a new king. And in this way, all of us are called in the way Levi is, to take whatever allegiances we had formerly, and sometimes that's just an allegiance to ourselves, to be the leader of our own life, and to surrender it to the kingship of Jesus, who is unlike any other king and unlike any other rabbi, because instead of wielding the scepter, he will wield a towel and basin. And instead of sitting on a throne, he will be nailed upon a cross. His is a kingdom of service and a kingdom of suffering. And as a rabbi, he doesn't wait for his students to come choose him. He comes to us and he says, follow me. So we see again the kingship of Jesus. At the end of that story, there's this bit where the teachers of the law and Pharisees see him eating with sinners. So he goes to Levi's house, he's eating with tax collectors and sinners, and they say, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not called to come the righteous. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Then we have this paragraph about Jesus being questioned about fasting. And again, we see a picture of Jesus being the king, because you fast while you're waiting on the king to come. But when the king is present, it's always a party. Every occasion is an occasion to feast. And so it's as if Jesus is saying, the king has arrived. It's not time to fast. It's time to feast. And then he has this image of a new piece of fabric sewn on an old garment to patch a hole, new wine put in old wineskins so that they burst. And it's like he's saying, you've been waiting for so long that you've adopted all of these old ways and traditions, and when God finally shows up doing a new thing, the old containers don't work anymore. You have to find new vehicles. You have to have new wineskins for new wine. God is doing something new because the kingdom that you've been waiting for so long is finally here. And that challenges me today, because even in the church, sometimes, the gospel, we've now received the new wine for 2,000 years, and we continue to receive the new wine of Jesus and his mission in the world. But we also can have a habit of getting really comfortable with old garments and old wineskins, and the vehicle and the container becomes more important to us than what it contains, the content. And so we always have to be people who are willing to say, okay, God, what new thing are you up to? And in what new way are you trying to bring your kingdom to bear in the world? And then finally, we have this bit about Jesus being Lord of the Sabbath. He's going through grain fields, and as his disciples are walking along, they begin to eat some of the grain, and the Pharisees say, look, they're doing what's unlawful on the Sabbath. Now, this is a big deal. So in my yearly reading of the Bible, I'm in Exodus, and what I just read in the law a couple of weeks ago was that, and I had to read it twice because I couldn't believe what I was reading. At first they said that if someone breaks the Sabbath, they're to be cut off from the community, because Sabbath practice was one thing that defined the people of God and set them apart from other people all over the world around them and surrounding nations. But then it said if someone breaks the Sabbath, they are to be put to death. So breaking the Sabbath, violating the Sabbath, was in the old law punishable by death when the law was first given in Exodus. So Jesus breaks it, and of course they question him about it, and then he gives the strangest answer. He doesn't refute the claim that he's breaking the Sabbath. He actually admits to it, but rather he tells a story about how King David, when he and his companions were hungry, in the days of Abiathar the high priest, they entered the house of God and they ate some of the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. And then he said, so the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, so the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Now we've talked about the phrase Son of God. Now we're seeing the phrase Son of Man, which also means God's appointed one, God's king. And in telling this story about King David, Jesus is not denying that he's breaking Sabbath, but he's basically saying, because the king of Israel at one point in our history had an excuse to break the Sabbath, so do I, because I am the king of Israel too. So again, all these stories have one common theme, and that is, I am the king. I have brought the kingdom with me. And when the kingdom of God shows up, things are different. Levi, you serve one king, now come serve another. Those of you who have had old garments and old wineskins for so long, you need to understand the kingdom of God is here. God is doing a new thing. Will you be part of that kingdom? Will you get on board with that new thing God is doing as He brings the kingdom to bear in your midst? And even the interpretation of the old law changes when the kingdom of God shows up in God fulfilling His promise by becoming present in our midst through the person of Jesus Christ, His long-awaited and appointed and anointed King. So all of these stories are showing us that Jesus is actually the King we've been waiting on. And all of what we see and all of what's around us and all that we experience and even we ourselves are part of His kingdom. And so we're called to take our place in it. I would love to know how that message challenges you today, how you hear an invitation in that today. If there's anything that you saw in the text that I didn't mention, let us learn, grow, and share together as we seep during this Lenten season in the Word of the Lord. Just a final word before I sign off to our brothers and sisters who are part of our church family. We had a town hall yesterday. I know that many of you were not able to be present because you're not attending worship in person yet. Just know that we're going to send out an update by e-news this afternoon. That's my hope. We actually took some notes from that town hall meeting. We gave an update about our steeple and how we're going to move forward with repairs to our sanctuary. So I know there were some questions about that for those that weren't able to come and hear that presentation. So we'll be sharing a written report of that by email, hopefully this afternoon. So just know that that's coming. And we look forward to seeing you again right here again tomorrow morning as we continue journeying through Mark. For today, God bless you, grace and peace.